Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for session 7 in our Hot Topics in Real Estate series hosted by the New England CCIM Chapter. Today's event is in collaboration with AREAA Boston's Commercial Real Estate Committee. I'd like to thank both of these great organizations for coming together and helping to make today's discussion happen. A special thank you to Bernadette, who's operating as today's Zoom master. A few housekeeping tips. We ask that you keep your cameras off and your microphones on mute during the panel discussion. If you have to go to the top of the screen, you can switch to speaker view to see the highlighted speakers. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can also use the chat to post any questions. We'll do our best to answer questions along the way, but we'll also have some time at the end. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube after the discussion. My name is Michael Chase. I'm a member of the Board of Directors and a past president of the New England CCIM Chapter. I'm also a past chair and member of AREAA Boston's Commercial Committee. Without further ado, let's introduce our other speakers. Abby, please take a moment to introduce yourself. I'm sorry, Emily.
All good. Thanks for having me, Michael. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Yormak. I am a tax attorney with Bay Specialized Tax Services. My work specifically focuses on real estate deductions, particularly around acquisition and renovations, largely cost segregation, along with disposition studies and capital expenditures. And then also later we'll be getting into why QPP is such a hot topic for us around acquisitions. So thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. Lynn?
Good afternoon, everyone. Lynn Tokarczyk, Government Tax Incentives Consultant. And Michael, thanks so much for inviting me this afternoon. It's great to be here. Business Development Strategies, we are a government tax incentives consulting firm. We help companies save cash if they have proposed real estate expansion plans. We assist companies to identify, negotiate, and secure municipal tax incentives as well as state tax credits if companies are planning on expanding, relocating, leasing a building, purchasing a building, or putting a shovel in the ground. We're celebrating 20 years in business. I don't know where the time has gone. So you'll hear more of my story in a few minutes. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lynn. And Raj, you appear to be joining us from San Francisco. Are you getting out there for the Super Bowl early, or what's going
I
on?
hope so. Yeah, yeah. No, I'm just kidding. I wish. I wish. I looked at tickets today, and I might need some financing for that actually. But anyways, yeah. Raj Kalra here. I'm a commercial lender with Eastern Bank. I do owner-occupied real estate and investment real estate, so I hope I could add some value here. I've been with Eastern Bank for a little over 10 years now, so looking forward to the discussion. And thanks, Mike, for putting this together.
Great. Well, thank each of you for joining us. I'm sure you're going to have some great insights to share. We're here today to talk about one of the interesting provisions that was included as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or the OBBBA, from last summer. It's one of the few new provisions that was introduced in that bill. And of course, we're talking about qualified production properties, or QPP. So, Emily, if you wouldn't mind, start us off with a quick description of this tax provision.
Yeah, absolutely. So QPP stands for Qualified Production Property. So normally in real estate, the items in a building that will be eligible for bonus depreciation are short life assets. So that's essentially anything that's not structural or land. However, components of a building that are being used for the production, manufacturing, or refinement of tangible personal property, so physical items, those now structural components are actually now eligible for bonus depreciation. So that's what the qualified production property coming in. So in addition to short life assets in a building, now those additional structural components that are being used for production are now eligible for bonus depreciation. So to give everyone an idea of what that could additionally entail, my favorite example is, for example, a specialized HVAC unit. So if you're producing products that have to be kept in a certain temperature range, for example, and you have a specialized HVAC system to keep the space in that temperature range, that would be an item that we would argue is qualified production property that would be eligible for bonus depreciation.
And something that wouldn't have been covered under the normal bonus depreciation that was also part of the one OBBBA.
Exactly. Yep. Typically in a cost seg study, generally HVAC units would be structural and not eligible for bonus depreciation.
And who is this QPP program or tax benefit designed to help? Who is it designed to benefit?
Generally, it's designed to benefit manufacturing. I mean, the essence behind QPP and a lot of the One Big Beautiful Bill generally was to bring manufacturing back into the US. So, for construction that was started after January 20th, 2025, and before January 1st, 2029, those buildings are going to be eligible for QPP as long as they're placed in service by January 1st of 2031. And then also for real property that is purchased after January 20th, 2025, as long as the property was not used for a qualified production activity between January 1st, 2021 and May 12th, 2025, that can also be eligible for QPP. So really the idea is a building that was not used for manufacturing being purchased and then subsequently used for manufacturing or new construction.
Great. So I'm hearing, as you mentioned, an incentive to continue this onshoring trend that we've seen. Also, an incentive for companies who are already here to either expand or relocate. But this is for owner occupants. It's not for the landlords.
That is correct. Yep, a tenant will not qualify for QPP. It has to be the owner who is conducting their own QPP activities in the building.
Okay, great. So, Lynn, let's shift over to you for a second. We've heard from Emily and how QPP is designed to work with manufacturers who occupy their property. And the way to I guess go after this benefit is to acquire something and then go and either build or renovate something. So how does this fit with some of the state and municipal tax incentives that you work with?
Well, that was a great overview, Emily. Very informative, very beneficial on that front. So basically, I'll share kind of like the framework for these tax incentives. So if companies have proposed real estate expansion plans, and I use the word proposed, if they've already move forward with their plans, put shovels in the ground, purchase buildings, renovate buildings, it's too late. And the theme here is don't leave cash on the table. So if companies they've outgrown a building and they need to find new space, as well as retaining and creating jobs in Massachusetts, these are economic development tools that are available, and companies have no idea they exist. And so these tax incentives help to offset project costs if companies are trying to make corporate real estate decisions. They're in a 50,000 square foot building. Now they need 100,000 square feet. They're conducting a site search with their real estate brokerage firm. And, they're trying to find that perfect property, whether it's an existing building or if it's a land parcel. And again, they need to offset their project costs. The price tag keeps ticking. It's an uptick with still inflation, interest rates, tariffs. And so they're trying to find ways to offset their project costs to make the project financially and economically feasible. And so we're focused on manufacturing companies, life science, advanced manufacturers, innovation, technology, high-end distribution, corporate headquarters. These are all the growth sectors in Massachusetts. As I mentioned, we're celebrating over 20 years in business. I don't know where the time has gone. And, we've assisted companies such as Analog Devices, Miller Sigma, Watson Marlowe up at Devon's, Catania Oils. So all different sectors. And it's really the tool is to help companies retain and create jobs, which is a requirement under the program. Retaining and creating jobs, that's number one. The second criteria requirement for the company is private real estate investment, which equals bringing new tax revenue to the municipality. So that means there needs to be an uptick in the assessed value of the property, therefore bringing new tax revenue. And, over the years, we've assembled a great team. We have a team of 10. We're known as TIF consultants, tax increment financing. So basically, we have a TIF attorney on our team. We have a CPA. We have a local assessor. We're projecting values. We've worked on the TIF TripAdvisor project in Needham. We've worked with Moderna. in Norwood 3 times. And so it's all different walks of life. And so basically, we're providing tax increment financing, which is a discount on future real estate taxes, anywhere from a minimum of 1% to a maximum of 100% in any given year, minimum of 5 years, maximum of 20 years. And so again, it doesn't impact the existing taxes. So if a company is trying to put a shovel in the ground, that's all new real estate taxes. Or if they're renovating a building, we know that the assessed value is going to uptick. And so that's a great tool, along with some potential state tax credits. Whether it's there are a variety of programs, different agencies, whether it's through the Mass Life Science Center, if it's a Mass Life Science Center company, a life science center company, or if it's a straightforward advanced manufacturer or distribution company. These companies, again, don't know that these programs exist. And the programs, if it's a town, everything has to go before a town meeting or city council, so it's a process. And so timing is essential. These tax incentives need to be secured before the company signs a lease or before they close on a property. So that's just very high level how these tax incentives work.
And so, Lynn, I know you're a specialist here in Massachusetts, but other states have very similar programs.
Other states have other programs. The TIF program in New Hampshire, as an example, focuses on more or less infrastructure, water, sewer, utilities, as an example. My background is I used to work for the governor's office way back when. Then I was recruited by Ernst & Young, so I was negotiating tax incentives all over the country. And then fast forward, we're celebrating over 20 years in business. So every state, they have different models. But the model here in Massachusetts has been extremely successful, can be quite lucrative. The beneficiary is the end user, is the tenant, is that manufacturing company, is the life science company, the companies that are trying to create jobs. It's not applicable to property owners, developers, although it's a great way for a property owner or developer to dangle the carrot, saying, we can, there could be potential tax incentives and in our building or at our property. So it's, again, the end user is, typically the tenant or the company.
Great. So what I'm hearing, trying to connect the dots a little bit better, is Emily talked about this QPP tax incentive, this bonus depreciation that's available. It's for manufacturers who occupy and use their property, but it can't be for a property that's already existing that's doing this use. So they have to go and buy a site, have to do development or do a renovation of a property that hasn't been used in one of these qualified production activities. And that's where that value creation comes in your TIF program. If that's a manufacturer then creating or maintaining jobs, because they have to go and build it, because they have to go and renovate it, they're increasing the value and they could get a break on their real estate taxes going forward, in addition to the bonus depreciation. That's great.
Yeah.
So, Emily,
Yes.
coming back to you, we heard from Lynn about these great incentives available from the state and from municipalities that could potentially be paired with this QPP, but it's not the only tax provision. So, what are some other tax programs or that could address maybe the other parts of a building that are not being used for that qualified production activity?
Mhm. Absolutely. So, a good old strategy to pair with QPP is your cost segregation study, which I imagine that everyone on the call probably knows what it is, but just to recap to make sure we're on the same page. With a cost segregation study, that's like what I mentioned earlier. We separate out these short life components from structure and land on a property. So basically, we'll go down to even as far nitty-gritty as crown molding to argue that it's not structural so that we can classify it as a short life asset, which is eligible for bonus depreciation. So what a cost segregation study would allow us to do in the context of QPP is it basically gives us our records of which components of the property are then short life, and then we can use that study to identify QPP components of a building.
So if I'm going to build a new facility, and let's say 60% of that building is going to be used for my qualified production activity, then I can take that 100% bonus depreciation for that section of the building. And then the other 40%, I can still use cost seg and other bonus depreciation for that.
Mhm. Exactly, yeah. So for example, if you're using, to your point, 60% of the building for production and then the other 40% is, say, administrative offices, even though those structural components in the administrative offices won't qualify as QPP, we can still take any additional short life assets that we can scrape out of that other 40% of the building for bonus depreciation.
Great.
Right. I just wanted to say that, Emily, the programs that you're representing, sometimes they are also mystery programs.
Mhm.
Companies are just not aware that these resources, these programs are available, and you can see how the value prop is increasing should
Mhm.
a manufacturer or another type of company have real estate expansion plans.
And that's a great point, Lynn. And you're talking about how do we get these deals to pencil, right? And so, Raj, I guess this is where we come to you. We've heard from Emily and Lynn about the benefits and potential incentives that can be used as part of a QPP project, but people still need capital for their acquisition, for their development, for their renovation plans. What's the current banking landscape like for working with business owners and also in particular SBA finance?
Yeah, no, correct. Great transition, by the way, Mike. Good job. Um, yeah, no, I think this is specifically for owner-occupied businesses, specifically manufacturers and production companies. So, that's where, the SBA has a 10% down program. Um, as long as the business is strong and still cash flow, we still have to do our underwriting due diligence. From a lender's point of view, tax incentives like this are more cash flow tools, not credit substitutes. So it does make things better at the end of the day, but we have to do our due diligence on the business itself. So it really is, we have to understand the tax benefit and how it translates into cash flow going forward. Obviously, there's a big cash flow benefit in the first year, but we likely underwrite it just like we would any other owner occupied loan. That being said, I mean, with the SBA right now, we would look at an experienced company to get that 10% down, as long as you're in business for at least a couple of years at least. But for startups, we'd probably still require 20% down. Eastern Bank has done a great job with building a relationship with the SBA. We're number one SBA lender for 17 years straight. So we are pretty quick to get any updates and really have the best collaboration for a quick turnaround time, yes or no. So I think we're well positioned for that.
So you talked about 80%, possibly 90% financing for these types of owner occupied, and it can be used for not only acquisition, but construction and renovation as well.
Correct. Yeah. So we would look at it as a complete project cost, purchase plus construction or renovation. So it'd be 10 to 20% of that. That being said, each deal is a little different, but my advice to anyone is make sure the budget is on point. We've been, a little more, we want a lot more details when it comes to constructions and around the budget. Understandable, they will change, but we want them to be as accurate as possible on the front end, and that will prevent any delays going forward. It really, if it's a large project, even more details are necessary. So I'd just be prepared to get in touch with contractors early and ask a million questions, so you'll have the answers to our questions.
That's great. That's great background. So, but 80% and 90% financing, how does that compare to normal CRE financing?
I mean, normal CRE it is case by case, but typically we start off with 75% financing or 80% financing on owner occupant. We can do 80% without SBA. To get the 90%, we do need the SBA involved.
Okay, but certainly a very particular type of program available for these owner occupants that they can leverage on top of QPP, on top of potential TIF or other incentives. Is really starting to sound like almost like a home run. So I'm curious, QPP was introduced as part of the OBBBA last summer, and but it doesn't seem like the news has been so widespread yet. Have any of you started to see deal flow that you've been able to kind of target and say, hey, that's QPP related? Have you ever seen deal flow yet,
I have not yet, no.
Emily?
Yeah, we're not seeing much yet. I think especially with kind of construction having to start after.
Yeah,
At least for my line of work, I sometimes kind of want to rip my hair out. I see people moping over the interest rates. And of course, the interest rates are the interest rates. But at least in our industry, 100% bonus depreciation back is like 3% interest rates in our world. So we're really excited. And I'm hopeful that this could potentially lead to business owners and developers potentially getting ahead. I mean, I've been watching the Wall Street Journal like a hawk, seeing when those interest rates are going to come down, but I am hopeful that maybe with 100% bonus depreciation, people might be more incentivized to get ahead. And I think to Lynn's point too, is this is a great opportunity for all of us in this call to really get kind of on the front end with our consulting and making sure that our clients are aware of these benefits. Because I think especially QPP is definitely more nuanced than cost segregation, so it's not as exciting. And taxes aren't necessarily fun, but I think saving money is. So I think this is really a great opportunity for all of us to get ahead, especially something new at like QPP. I mean, cost segregation has been around since the 80s, but I think, like I said, I'm pretty optimistic about the opportunities that we can all capitalize on with this.
that's great. Lynn, how about yourself? Are you starting to see any QPP driven business yet? Yeah. So I think that's why this is such an
Not
opportune
yet.
time.
No,
Yeah,
not yet. But this is a great tool that we would love to share with our clients and projects clients that we're tracking that have investment plans and it's a no-brainer. So we'd be happy to be part of the team to share this new program.
that's great. And I think that's why, these organizations, New England CCIM Chapter and AREAA Boston, supported putting together this discussion because we think this is an opportune time to express some first mover advantages that really people should be thinking about and jumping into these benefits right away. So, Emily, coming back to you, what are some timeframes that people should be aware of related to QPP?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say really the big three timeframes to look at are if you are constructing a new building, construction has to start anytime from January 20th of 2025 to January 1st, 2029. And the property has to be placed in service before January 1st of 2031. And then for if you're purchasing an existing building that was not used for a qualifying production activity, it cannot have been used for production between January 1st of 2021 through May 12th of 2025. So those are some pretty specific parameters around how long the building cannot have been used previously for production activity. So those I would say are really the big time frames for businesses to look at as far as if they are taking the leap for qualified production building. And then I think just one more note on the timeline, although it's not as much with the timeline, but with buildings, with administrative offices in the same facility as production spaces, I think something I would probably urge business owners to look out for is just maybe consider, if we're building from scratch, how can we maybe really maximize that production space and minimize any additional administrative spaces? Because another thing too to note is software development and engineering activities do not qualify. When this first came out, we were like, oh my goodness, software development. And then we saw no, software development does not count. So those are kind of some things I would keep in mind with having to place the property in service before January 1st of 2031.
So I'm hearing about a 5-year window that currently exists, which here in the Northeast, we're notorious for our elongated entitlement period. So sounds long, but at the same time, may not be as long as we would like. So, Lynn, let's talk about some tax incentives. What are the lead times and the timing that it takes to sometimes put together some of these packages in order to kind of fit into this type of compressed window?
Right. Well, so it's really when companies are searching for space. Companies now realize that they need more space. They've outgrown their building. They need to identify a new location. And so they typically excuse me, they're typically working with their real estate brokerage firm to find these sites. And so that's typically, or they could be working with their construction company, their architect, their bank. We work closely with Eastern Bank, so great team over. Shout out to Eastern Bank. So they're working with many different service providers, and so that's typically when we receive the phone call. And again, we need time to secure these tax incentives. As I mentioned, there's a process. If it's a town, it has to go before a town meeting. We know that town meetings meet once a year, typically in the spring. Sometimes it's like, I don't know how any business gets done, with a once a year town meeting. However, more progressive communities have two town meetings, one in the spring, one in the fall. And then it seems we're always involved with special town meetings. We've had town meetings on December 21st, on February 1st, on July in the height of the summertime, in the end of July during, vacation time. And so it's really, so we're receiving, phone calls all throughout the day, emails, messages. Does this project qualify? Does that project qualify? And so the question is, my first question is, what is your timing? Well, if they say, we plan to sign a lease next week, okay, that doesn't work. Because we need at least, 30, 60, 90 days, depending if it's a city or if it's a town. Or, the other question is, again, if they're looking to purchase a 100,000 square foot building, how much do you plan to spend to renovate the building? And, and this is obviously on the municipal side. And if they say $1 million or 2 million, well, that's not going to move, that's $2 million, that's not going to move the needle. So because we need to see a more substantial renovation. And again, one of the requirements is bringing new tax revenue to the municipality. And we need to see a more substantial renovation spend in order to have the assessed value of the building increase. So again, it's all about timing. However, then on the state side, we're working with state tax credits, and it's a piecemeal. One of the major changes over the past year was as a result of the governor's economic development bill, where the state was overseeing TIFs on the municipal side, and there was a requirement where the state was required to approve it. Well, no longer is that the case. There's been a decoupling of the state on the TIF side with the municipalities. So, however, that means that there's even more potential opportunity on the state side for state tax credits. There's a new program that introduces potential refundable state tax credits, even for manufacturers. Before, there was no double dipping with manufacturers. As we all know, if manufacturers are registered by the Department of Revenue and designated as a manufacturer, they can enjoy a statutory tax credit, 3% investment tax credit. And again, there was no double dipping. Well, now there is. There could be the 3% investment tax credit as well as a potential refundable state tax credit, and it's all driven on new jobs. So there are many multiple programs available, but timing is essential. Typically, you want to see the incentives secured, whether it's on the state side, whether it's on the municipal side, before the company moves forward with their corporate real estate expansion plans. These programs are designed to encourage companies to expand. It's not like frosting on the cake. So it's a great tool to help companies stay competitive in Massachusetts.
I'm hearing it's very important to understand the application, the award and allocation process for these incentives. I imagine these pools are not limitless. So what are, what are some of the sizes of these pools, or do they tend to run out, or do they take years in order to apply? Do you have to kind of go through second, third rounds in order to see an award?
Right. Well, on the municipal side, it's, the cap is really 20 years for any of the municipal programs, tax increment financing. There's also a special tax assessment. And on the state side, there are caps, basically $30 million per year. That's more the high level. Then it's, reallocated every year. So again, but it's all about timing and it's companies are looked at on a case by case situation.
Mm.
What's their story? What's the background? What's the proposed plan? But I can say that obviously the state of Massachusetts is very competitive and very engaged with all of these programs, and municipalities as well. They're looking for great companies that get involved with, that will create a positive economic impact, that are very community involved. So even on the tax increment financing side, municipalities have been very open and positive to attract these businesses. Again, they're not losing a dime. With tax increment financing, the city or town doesn't lose a dime on the existing base. It's only, again, a discount on future real estate taxes. So it's a win-win.
Great. And then Raj, we saw SBA kind of get a little bit of a backlog, especially, we just had the government shutdown and there was a good backlog there. So what are some timeframes that we need to be thinking about, either in the business banking side or SBA side, as again, someone's putting together a package or a business plan?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The earlier, the better. You never know what's going to happen. We didn't know when the SBA was going to reopen. We had some ideas, but nothing is certain. And then when it did finally open, there was a big backlog. So it took longer to get deals done. Even deals that were credit approved by us, they still have to get it to close. That the SBA had to be open, so that took some time. So yeah, just get us involved early and often. We have standard list of requirements that we need, but also we can help get the documents you need from your contractor and just lay out all your options for you. So there's nothing really unexpected that comes down the road.
Great. So what I'm hearing is, for us as advisors who are working with these clients and for the people who might want to look to benefit from QPP and then all the other potential incentives that they could then marry with that and the potential financing that they could go with, it really is a time to get ahead of it. It's don't find yourself waiting in line for these incentives. Don't find yourself waiting in line to secure that financing. Don't find yourself bidding on potential land sites after the seller is aware that there's all this additional demand coming at them from people who are looking to relocate or expand their operations. So, or those prices might go up. So very much a first mover advantage available out there. If we can work with our clients, work with these businesses and help them through the process and be their advisors along the way. So it all sounds great. There's all these things that we've talked about, and again, we're all looking for these ways to make these deals pencil. And it sounds like there's, with QPP, with additional bonus depreciation, with potential development incentives, and combining that with 90% financing, that sounds like a long way to getting these things to pencil. What are some warnings or challenges that people should be aware of when thinking about these programs? Emily, is there any, are there any hooks? Many of these government programs have some hooks in them. So what's kind of the small print that we should be aware of?
Sure. So I would say the one that we discussed is the 10-year clawback period. So for QPP, if the qualified production activity ceases within 10 years, then any depreciation taken on the QPP would be taxed as ordinary income on the recapture. So typically, when it comes to depreciation recapture, personal property, so short life assets, would be taxed as ordinary income on recapture, and then real property is capped at the capital gains rate. So that I would say is really the one thing to look out for. Frankly, I think something that makes me feel better about it is I would anticipate that a lot of these manufacturing companies that will be taking advantage of QPP are probably already in the business. And so it's kind of just something to look out for. I mean, the best benefit of bonus depreciation is like what I believe we mentioned earlier on this webinar is, having that liquid capital back up front to reinvest in the portfolio or into business operations.
I did see a question come in from Shyla, and she's saying, I'd imagine that QPP would drive deeper investment into mixed-use developments. Do you see a reason QPP would not work in a mixed-use development scenario? Emily, I'll ask you first.
Sure. I agree with Shyla. I can't see a reason why QPP wouldn't work, but I would maybe defer to Lynn and Raj on potentially if there are any limitations that we need to be aware of on a more local level or with respect to lending.
Yeah, I mean, I could jump in right there. I mean, so from what I heard earlier, I think you could you get the incentive based on what percentage of the building is used as a manufacturing or a production company. In terms of financing it, using the SBA and essentially having it be owner occupied, it would need to be at least 51% owner occupied by the business, by the operating company.
And how about you, Lynn? Do you see the types of incentives that you work on as being part of mixed use developments?
Um, we have in the past, not often. When we see mixed use developments now, fast forward, we're seeing, a lot on the residential side. And there are programs out there for residential, but again, the programs that we represent are more commercial and industrial. And just on that point, what's the downside for some of the, what's the cautionary due diligence? It's really making sure you have enough time because when you're going to a municipality, they do not like to be strong-armed. And, a lot of these companies are on the fast track. They want these tax incentives secure. They're trying to make corporate real estate decisions in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And, when you're dealing with the residents, you have to give them ample time to digest it, to educate it, to understand what a TIF is. The only definition they know of a TIF is a feud between two people. They have no idea it's a financial vehicle. So there's a lot of educating, whether it's the municipal officials, whether it's the residents. So, the sooner the better to begin conversations, especially on the municipal side.
Great, thank you, Lynn. When other programs have come out in the past, such as qualified opportunity zones, they came out in 2017, but then it seemed like it took years to get all of the regulatory guidance to come out and actually frame up what that program was about. So, Emily, when we're talking about QPP, what are some things that we're still waiting for in terms of regulatory guidance to clarify?
Sure. So, for example, with QPP, the bill says that a qualified production activity has to involve substantial production. The bill does not define what substantial production means. Of course, kind of being on the legal side of my firm, I like to get the brain exercise of getting creative with what that means. The specifically restaurants where food is being produced in the same facility that it's being served, those have explicitly been excluded from QPP because, of course, I would think, oh, well, I'm producing food, that's production activity. It is not. But the exact definition for substantial transformation is the biggest piece where we're waiting for more IRS guidance. And I think actually to Shiloh's question, I would be curious if in the next year or so we maybe see any more specificity around any mixed use restrictions. But the substantial production is really what is substantial production? Well, that's for our legal team to argue. But basically, manufacturing, it's the some definitions get very specific with putting two pieces together, but that would be one area where we're awaiting more guidance.
Okay, great. Um, Raj, coming back to you, on the banking front, is there anything on your horizon that you're seeing that may be impacting interest rates or bank appetite for lending?
We're still in an uncertain environment, with the rates the way they are, and so I think a couple certainties that we do have. We love multifamily residential. That's a little unrelated, but we love that. Office space is still a challenge. That being said, I feel like one of the benefits of the office space kind of being, a shied away asset class is that for owner occupants, it's a great deal. They're usually more affordable. You can get them for cents on the dollar, and we can finance that based on the business that's occupying that. So I think, in terms of where rates are, I think residential rates have dropped a lot more than commercial rates. But we have seen they're more stable and with a slow decline. I can't really anticipate going forward they'll go much higher, but I'm optimistic. But then again, we really have to see what happens.
And Lynn, it looks like we got a question kind of specifically for your area of expertise from Barbara. She's asking, does the state of Massachusetts have a handout for municipalities so that TIFs are better understood and potentially accepted as a benefit to a community?
Well, that was always the case. There was a defined program, which there still is a defined program. It was actually set up under the Massachusetts Economic Development Incentive Program, where municipalities would then, once they approved a TIF at town meeting or city council, the state would be required to approve as well because it was a state program. As I mentioned, it has been decoupled. And so now more than ever, municipalities, we're working in lots of municipalities with TIFs right now because we have the team that moves forward with identifying, negotiating, and securing these tax incentives in municipalities. But there are, lists available. I'd be happy to share with you many of the communities, fast forward, but fast backwards, when the program first started, there were only 35 communities that were able to offer TIFs. They were more the economically distressed communities. And then fast forward, then 100 became available, 200. Well, then the legislature, who enacted this enabling legislation back in the mid-90s for TIFs, the state legislature felt that every community in every corner of the Commonwealth should be able to have this economic development tool. It's primarily focused on communities that have commercial, industrial zoned properties, obviously for manufacturers, distribution, research and development. So more, you won't see too many TIFs in bedroom communities because they don't have the properly zoned properties. But it's a great tool. And so be happy to, connect with you afterwards on any more details.
Great. And I see, I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention Barbara's initial comment, messaging from Western Mass, go Pats. And Shyla also provided a link to Business Front Door on mass.gov. I'd also like to invite people now, if you have a question, you can either add it to the chat or you can raise your hand and we'll invite you to take off mute if you'd like to ask a question to our panelists. But kind of going back to what we've been kind of summarizing what we've been talking about, there is this great program available, and we're all looking for ways to get our deals to pencil. You have tax benefits at the federal level from this depreciation. You've got state local benefits. You've got attractive financing, but the news isn't out yet. So really, first mover advantage, get out there. This could also be a way for people who are in one area of real estate and looking for their next area of focus. Maybe they want to pivot and go and help people who are, in a different niche, in a different area, a part of real estate that might be growing over the next several years. And just as an avenue moving, they're always looking for, what is the hot area that I can go to? And maybe they're right now working in multifamily or they're working in retail, but if they learn more about this, maybe they can advise their clients about QPP and they can work with those manufacturers and those other folks out there looking to take advantage of this program. So, any final thoughts to share as we go around the horn? Emily?
I think definitely it's, a great opportunity for a lot of us to work together, those of us in kind of different playing fields in the kind of greater commercial real estate infrastructure. I often get on calls with clients before they submit an offer on a deal, and we find, kind of to reinforce what Lynn was saying earlier, getting on the front end and making sure that the client is aware that these benefits exist really will help them maximize. I think nothing breaks my heart more than when I talk to someone after the fact and there are missed opportunities on the table. So I think really just a great way for us all to work together and really help our clients benefit the most from these new programs.
Lynn?
Yes, no, that is great. Emily, to segue on what Emily just said, wh- it's the worst thing is to get a phone call from a CFO after they've constructed their building or, put a shovel in the ground and they're not eligible. The program's not retroactive and they're not too happy when they've left cash on the table. And it's, they're saying, why didn't I know about this program in advance? So, and a shout out to Shyla, who's on the, who's participating this afternoon. And yes, the Business Front Door is a great resource for a variety of programs, whether it's mass development, bond financing for manufacturers. That's a great tool that we've opened the door for many of our clients to participate with mass development finance programs, lots of creative financing there. There are energy and climate tech programs. There are programs through the Massachusetts Tech Collaborative, through Mass MEP, Massachusetts Manufacturing Extension Partnership. There are so many resources and programs available for manufacturers, life science companies, innovation technology, high-end distribution, corporate headquarters. So Massachusetts has it all. And again, it's a great way for Massachusetts to stay competitive.
I'm glad we're recording this because there are people frantically trying to write down all of the things that you just mentioned, Lynn. And to Douglas's question, we will have a link to the video. We'll send it out to the people who registered to participate, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. How can we reach out to the panelists? I know every one of these people are on LinkedIn as well, but we can also send out contact information. You can reach out to the New England CCIM chapter or AREAA Boston, and we'll be happy to put you in contact. Raj, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think this is a great panel. I think I learned a lot as well, and I'm going to be in touch with some of the panelists as well. But I would just say, remember to get the lender involved early and often. We are financing 80 or 90%. Even before you find a property would be great, just so we can give you some guidance on it, so everything will run a lot more efficiently. And then I would say, just always keep in mind, we as lenders are, and especially in this environment, we're underwriting a lot of what we're doing based on the sponsor and the business, not just the property. It could be the most amazing property, but if it's a new business or a newer sponsor or someone that doesn't have as much liquidity or for any reason, it still might be a tough deal. So I would just say, just keep that in mind. And then that's pretty much it for me. Like I said, thanks for including me on this panel. I appreciate it. And go Pats.
So just in summary, when we're thinking about QPP and all these other things, this is a way for manufacturers to really drive that return on investment. People have been trying to figure out if I am kind of growing, looking to expand, how do I make those numbers work? And this is a great way. You pair all these things together, all these incentives together, and that can really drive that ROI. For us, as transactional real estate professionals, advisors, we all know that the way the way to make transactions happen is to sometimes find things that are beyond just your typical returns. If you think about how 1031 influences, triple net retail sales, those sellers are looking for those buyers who have 1031s because those buyers are not just motivated by your typical return requirement. They've got a tax motivation behind that potential purchase. Well, again, the people who have properties who might be able to be, land that might be able to be redeveloped or properties that might be able to be renovated, they may find demand from these manufacturers who are looking to use QPP with these other incentives and are willing to pay a price that's beyond just your typical return metrics. So I would like to thank all of our panelists today and like to thank all the people who attended for the discussion. This recording will be available on YouTube. Please feel free to reach out to the New England CCIM chapter and AREAA Boston and any of our esteemed panelists if you have any questions. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Raj and Lynn, I feel like I learned a lot from both of you today, so it was a pleasure.
Yes, look forward to connecting after the
Likewise.
session. Yep.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thanks
you.
again.